Buckle up, because the atmosphere is about to throw everything it's got at the United States, right? As millions of people fire up their grills and plan their fireworks shows. A massive, sprawling ring of fire weather pattern is locking into place across the country, and trust me, this is not a pattern you want to ignore. This setup is going to deliver a 1-2 punch of significant severe weather paired with absolutely brutal, oppressive heat. And it's all happening right as the nation gears up for Independence Day celebrations. Here's what's driving all of this chaos. A colossal upper-level ridge is building overhead, and it's about to construct a heat dome so massive it will bake much of the country in stifling warmth. But here's the twist. While that heat dome sits and simmers, powerful disturbances are going to ride right along its northern edge like waves crashing against a shoreline. Each of these disturbances is going to act like a trigger, sparking rounds of dangerous thunderstorms as they roll through. Today's disturbance has its sights set on the Midwest, the northern and central plains, and the southeast. In these zones, we're talking about extreme atmospheric instability combined with strong wind shear, basically the perfect recipe for supercell thunderstorms. These aren't your garden variety pop-up showers. We're talking about storms capable of producing destructive straight-line winds, very large hail, and yes, even the potential for a tornado or two. And as if that weren't enough, this volatile pattern is expected to expand eastward, eventually threatening the East Coast right as we roll into the 4th of July weekend. Let me be blunt. We are staring down a genuinely dangerous weather pattern for the 4th of July. So let's not waste any time. Let's dive straight into the forecast, because there is a lot to cover today, and several important updates have come in that you need to know about. Let's start with today, which is Thursday. We've got a substantial level 3 risk of severe weather in play. And if you're anywhere near Sioux Falls, stretching back into southeastern North Dakota, you're sitting right in the bullseye. Meanwhile, folks in Minneapolis and Milwaukee, you're under a level 2 risk of severe storms today as well. Now here's an interesting wrinkle. A lot of these same areas were originally forecast to experience a pretty significant severe weather event yesterday, but the atmosphere had other plans. It ended up being a shockingly minimal severe weather day across most of the Midwest, despite forecasters having placed a large enhanced risk over the region. That's actually the reason there wasn't a live forecast update yesterday. Sometimes the atmosphere just doesn't cooperate with the models, and yesterday was one of those days. Today, though, might tell a very different story. In addition to that Midwest threat, we've also got a broad level 1 risk of severe weather stretching all the way from Maine back through the high plains. And don't forget about the southeast. There's a level 2 risk of severe storms hovering near Atlanta, Georgia, as well. So what's the biggest concern for today? Damaging winds, and we're not talking about a gentle breeze knocking over a lawn chair. These winds could gust as high as 85 miles per hour in some spots. If you happen to live in Sioux Falls, Rapid City, or Minneapolis, do yourself a favor and go batten down those trampolines this afternoon, because that kind of wind can turn outdoor furniture into projectiles. On top of the wind threat, we could also see some very large hail developing, particularly near Rapid City, into Nebraska and back up into North Dakota. And yes, a few tornadoes are also on the table today. Interestingly, the Storm Prediction Center actually walked back the tornado threat for today compared to earlier forecasts. Initially, there was a 5% tornado risk that included Sioux Falls, but that's now been downgraded to a more modest 2% tornado risk. Whether or not tornadoes actually materialize today is really going to hinge on smaller scale atmospheric features that are notoriously tricky to predict. My advice? Stay weather aware regardless. I wouldn't completely rule out an isolated EF2 or stronger tornado popping up, but the overall risk of that happening remains fairly low. Moving into Friday, which is the day before the 4th of July, we've got 2 separate level 2 risk zones for severe weather. The first stretches from Rapid City all the way to Chicago, and the second sits across the mid-Atlantic and interior Northeast. Beyond those 2 zones, there's also a marginal threat of severe weather covering a truly massive area that includes Louisville, Nashville, Indianapolis, St. Louis, and just north of Kansas City. The headline, concern for Friday, will once again be significant damaging wind gusts. We could also see some large to very large hail, mainly concentrated across the Central Plains. And just like today, a couple of tornadoes will be possible, though this tornado threat will likely evolve and possibly expand in future outlooks as we get closer to the event. Right now, the tornado potential is mainly centered around Sioux City, extending toward Omaha, where an isolated tornado or 2 could spin up during the afternoon and evening hours. Now let's get to the forecast everyone's really been waiting for. What's actually going to happen on the 4th of July itself? Here's the deal. There's a large swath of the country where thunderstorms will simply be possible. If you're anywhere within that light green shaded zone on the map, you should expect at least a chance of thunderstorms rolling through, but within the darker green and yellow zones, we're expecting isolated to scattered severe storms. primarily during the afternoon and evening hours. So if you call Milwaukee, Chicago, Buffalo, Cleveland, Louisville, Cincinnati, or Indianapolis home, mark this down. You're in an area where we're anticipating at least some isolated damaging wind and large hail, with a small chance of an isolated tornado thrown into the mix as well. But the area facing the absolute highest risk stretches from Richmond through New York City. This is the zone most likely to see its 4th of July plans thrown into disarray by severe weather. If you live in this corridor, please pay close attention to the forecast as the holiday approaches. Given everything we've just covered, it should be crystal clear just how important it is to have a reliable way to receive lightning detection alerts and severe weather warnings. Ideally, something that can reach you immediately, even with a phone call if necessary. When dangerous weather strikes, the single most important factor is time. Tornadoes, destructive winds, flash flooding, and other life-threatening storms can develop and intensify incredibly quickly. If you don't get that warning in time, the consequences can be severe, sometimes tragically so. V. This is exactly why having a dedicated, personalized weather alert system matters so much. Rather than relying on a generic weather app that bombards you with constant notifications about storms hundreds of miles away, a truly effective alert system should only reach out when things get serious. Ideally, if your exact location falls inside a tornado warning, a severe thunderstorm warning, a tornado emergency, or a flash flood emergency, you'd receive an immediate personal notification, something impossible to sleep through or accidentally dismiss. Because a system like this uses your precise location, you don't have to worry about false alarms from warnings that have nothing to do with where you actually are. When that alert comes through, you know without question that it matters and that you need to act. Beyond just severe warnings, a good system should also provide lightning alerts and all-clear notifications, so you always know both when danger is approaching and when it's finally safe to go back outside. The best part about services like this is that they're typically very affordable, often costing somewhere in the range of $15 a year, which works out to roughly $1 a month. That's an incredibly small price to pay for genuine peace of mind, especially heading into a major weather event like this 4th of July stretch. If you want to protect yourself and your family with faster, smarter, and more reliable weather alerts, it's absolutely worth looking into a dedicated personal alert service before this weekend hits. Now, let's get back into the nitty-gritty of the forecast. Let's talk timing, because the next several days are going to be busy, and knowing when storms are likely to hit your area can make all the difference in your holiday planning. Starting with today, we're expecting scattered showers and thunderstorms to continue through the rest of the morning across southern Wisconsin, though severe weather is unlikely during this window. Things start to change just after lunchtime, when storms may begin firing up just south of Minneapolis. The primary threat from this activity should be damaging wind. There's a chance we could see an isolated tornado spin up as well, but overall, wind looks like it will be the dominant concern from this particular cluster of storms. It's shaping up to be a genuinely stormy afternoon and evening across northern Iowa and back into central and southern Wisconsin. I do want to flag something, though. This exact same region looked primed for 3 separate rounds of thunderstorms yesterday, and in reality, it barely managed to produce 1 round. The models have been acting a bit unreliable regarding storm development in this area over the past 24 hours, so we'll have to watch closely to see whether today's forecast actually verifies. Regardless, it's shaping up to be a messy afternoon and evening across the Midwest. The tornado risk should remain low, with damaging wind continuing to be the primary concern. Meanwhile, out in the central and northern plains, scattered showers and thunderstorms will begin firing up mainly during the late afternoon hours. West of Fargo and Grand Forks looks like the most likely spot for a line of storms to develop, and this line could produce a significant damaging wind threat. There's also a chance of spin-up tornadoes further south in South Dakota and even into northern Nebraska, particularly if any discrete supercells manage to organize on their own. As we push into the late evening and overnight hours, a cluster of storms could approach Minneapolis, bringing damaging wind potential along with it. Then, as we transition into Friday morning, some remnant storm activity from today may linger and push into Milwaukee and Chicago, with isolated to scattered damaging winds still possible. Looking ahead to Friday as a whole, the severe weather threat should stay mostly isolated rather than widespread. I don't see any particular area facing an overwhelming, large-scale threat. That said, if I had to pinpoint the area with the best chance of seeing severe weather, it would be right around Omaha, Nebraska. In fact, the atmospheric parameters we use to gauge significant tornado potential are looking a bit more favorable through this corridor, stretching from central Nebraska back into western Illinois. This is definitely a region worth watching closely. Friday is shaping up to be one of those tricky, disorganized storm days, the kind meteorologists sometimes call a mesoscale day. Individual storms may struggle to organize on a large scale, but if any of them interact favorably with atmospheric boundaries, or if storms happen to merge together, that could set the stage for a stronger, more dangerous tornado threat to emerge unexpectedly. Otherwise, expect the storms to mainly bring damaging winds, some large hail, and plenty of lightning. As we move into the overnight hours heading into Saturday, this activity will likely push into Chicago and Milwaukee. So here's the big question everyone wants answered. What does the actual 4th of July look like? Unfortunately, it's shaping up to be a pretty stormy day across large portions of the country. Saturday morning will likely start off with leftover storm activity from Friday night's system, creating a messy, muggy start to the day stretching from Wisconsin back toward Kansas City. This lingering activity could bring some additional damaging winds before it clears out. Once we move into the afternoon, a fresh round of storms is expected to fire up. The good news is that I don't see a particularly favorable environment for widespread tornado development on Saturday specifically. Instead, expect scattered severe storms to pop up across a broad stretch of the country, anywhere from Minneapolis and Sioux Falls back through Ohio, near Pittsburgh, and even extending toward New York City and Washington, D.C. The primary concern throughout this zone will be damaging wind gusts. Now, here's the part that really matters for your holiday plans. By the time most people are getting ready to light off fireworks, there's still likely to be scattered thunderstorm activity anywhere from Amarillo back through Pittsburgh. Things should become a bit more isolated near New York City by around 10 or 11 p.m. The Midwest should see some clearing during the evening hours, but even there, a few lingering thunderstorms can't be ruled out entirely. Given all of this, I strongly recommend having access to some kind of lightning detection service for the evening. Being able to quickly check whether lightning is active in your immediate area could be the difference between a safe fireworks show and a dangerous situation. And unfortunately, the severe weather doesn't wrap up once the 4th of July ends. Sunday will continue to see severe weather potential, with activity mostly focused across the Ohio Valley and East Coast. Expect isolated to scattered severe weather to remain the main story as we close out the holiday weekend. Zooming out a bit, it's worth understanding where we sit in the broader tornado season. As we push deeper into July, the overall tornado threat across the country typically starts to decline. Historically, we don't see nearly as many tornadoes during the second half of July compared to earlier in the season. That said, during the first half of July, which is exactly where we are right now, tornado outbreaks can absolutely still occur. In fact, generally speaking, the peak months for tornado activity in the U.S. run from late March all the way through early July. We're essentially right at the tail end of that peak window right now, which is part of why this pattern deserves your attention. Going forward, expect to see a lot more emphasis on damaging wind and hail potential, along with numerous lines of thunderstorms rolling through various regions. However, if any significant upper-level troughs move through, we could still see tornado threats reemerge in a meaningful way. It's definitely something worth continuing to monitor as we move through the rest of the month. Outside of any major trough passages, though, tornado activity during this stretch will likely remain more isolated in nature rather than widespread outbreaks. Now let's shift gears and talk about something that's going to affect almost everyone with outdoor plans over the next several days: the heat. And I mean serious, dangerous heat. Let's look at the heat index values, essentially the feels-like temperatures, for this afternoon. Boston is looking at a feels-like temperature of around 112 degrees. Indianapolis will feel like roughly 105 degrees. St. Louis comes in at 107. Now you might be thinking, that's not too unusual for summer, right? Actually, it really is. These numbers are significantly warmer than what's typical for this time of year. Moving into Friday, the heat shows no signs of relenting. Charlotte is forecast to hit a scorching 106-degree feels-like temperature. Nashville will feel like a slightly more bearable but still uncomfortable 101 degrees. Detroit comes in at 104, and even Chicago will feel like 98 degrees. Bottom line, it's going to be hot pretty much everywhere. And here's the kicker. Even on the 4th of July itself, the heat is sticking around in a big way. If you're lucky enough to be near Chicago, Minneapolis, or Sioux Falls, you'll catch a bit of a break, with temperatures feeling more seasonal, generally in the 80s. But if you're anywhere near Memphis, Nashville, or Oklahoma City, and you're planning to set off fireworks right at 4 p.m., brace yourself. It's going to be absolutely brutal out there. Even by 10 p.m., when a lot of fireworks shows are wrapping up, don't expect much relief. It's still going to be sweltering, particularly in places like Oklahoma City and Dallas, where feels-like temperatures will likely still be sitting somewhere between 90 and 95 degrees. So if you've got 4th of July plans, prepare accordingly, because for most of the country, this is not shaping up to be a comfortable, pleasant holiday evening. Around the time fireworks typically go off, expect muggy, sticky conditions to dominate. On a slightly more positive note, wind conditions for the 4th of July itself look relatively calm across most of the country. Wind gusts should generally top out somewhere between 15 and 20 miles per hour. The strongest gusts will mainly be confined to areas near the Rockies. Overall, these are fairly reasonable conditions for firework displays from a wind perspective. However, there's another factor that deserves serious attention, especially across the western half of the country: relative humidity. We're looking at relative humidity values dropping below 25% in several western areas. This is a significant fire danger concern, and it's serious enough that some locations in Colorado have actually decided to cancel fireworks displays altogether due to the elevated wildfire risk currently in place. As for cloud cover, here's what things are expected to look like around 10 p.m. Central Time on the 4th of July. The Great Lakes region should see fairly cloudy skies, with some partly cloudy conditions extending into nearby areas. Meanwhile, the Pacific Northwest looks like it'll enjoy crystal clear skies, and the Southeast should see mostly clear conditions as well. Good news if you're in either of those regions and hoping for unobstructed fireworks viewing. So there you have it. A genuinely complex and frankly dangerous weather setup unfolding right as the country heads into one of its biggest holiday weekends of the year. Between the risk of damaging winds, large hail, isolated tornadoes, and oppressive, dangerous heat, this is not a weekend to let your guard down when it comes to weather awareness. Make sure you're staying tuned to updated forecasts as we get closer to the holiday, since some of these threats, particularly the tornado potential, could shift or intensify as we gather more data over the coming days. And if you haven't already, seriously consider setting up some kind of personalized weather alert system so you're never caught off guard by a sudden warning, whether that's for severe storms or dangerous lightning during your fireworks celebration. Stay safe out there, keep an eye on the sky, and here's hoping everyone gets to enjoy their 4th of July as safely as possible despite everything the atmosphere is throwing at us this year. Thanks so much for following along with this forecast breakdown. We'll continue tracking this pattern closely, and we'll have more updates as new information comes in